Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us on the Monday Mindset Movement. Welcome, Mrs. Bintudo. All right, Lachelle Atkins, so glad that you're here this morning. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on Instagram. Thank you for those of you that are joining us on LinkedIn. I see you. Yes. Do me a favor, if you're joining us on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook, or YouTube, go ahead and give me the, what do I want to call it? Just say hey, say hello. Hey, BM hairs and more. I like it. Awesome. We're getting ready to jump into the Monday Mindset Movement. Tamika S. Graham, so glad that you're here this morning on Instagram. Glad to see you this morning. All right, those of you that are on LinkedIn, go ahead and just let me know that you're there. Go ahead and type your names in the chat so I can give you a shout out on the show. All right, so glad that everybody's here this morning. Hey, y'all, welcome to the show. Here's my question to start out. Have you ever seen someone going through a challenge and wonder how they're able to keep their heads up and smile? How about this? Have you ever seen someone that just looks like life should be tough for them, but their face says otherwise? What about those who seem like every day is a bad day, no matter what day it is? How does this work? And is there a secret pill that makes all the difference? Today, we're gonna unravel the secrets behind bouncing higher after a fall. We're gonna share some insights and spark a fire within. We're gonna weave through narratives that not only inspire, but also equip you with the tools to forge ahead. It's not just about getting through the storm. It's about dancing in the rain. Welcome to the Monday Mindset, y'all. Welcome to the show. My name's Robert Kennedy III, RK3. That's me, the Monday Mindset Movement, 15 to 30 minutes of motivation, elevation, and inspiration designed to get you rocking and rolling, thinking and blinking through your week. Thank you all for showing up today on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I'm glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you are here. Lachelle Atkins, good to see you. Tamika S. Graham, good to see you. Don Kirk Lewis, good to see you this morning. Good to see you, John, on LinkedIn. Good to see you, Mary, on YouTube. Excellent. So glad that y'all are here this morning. Let's jump on in to the show. Let's do it. All right. Come on.
It's time to get motivated, elevated, and accelerated. It's your time to jump out of your comfort zone and reach higher. It's time to get up and go. Grab your cup of grit and your daily dose of resilience. It's time for the Monday Mindset Movement with your host, Robert Kennedy III, RK3. It's time.
What's going on? Hey, y'all. Welcome to the show. So glad that y'all are here. Bruno Karakama on Instagram. So glad that you're here this morning. Yes, y'all. You want to know when we're going live? Text live, LIVE, to 240-557-8679. That's 240-557-8679. Text the word live there. Judith Schneidman on YouTube. So glad that you're here this morning. Yes. Come on, Monday Mindset. Nod your head. Bounce. We're talking about bouncing this morning. Bounce, bounce. Yeah, I'm so glad that y'all are here. I am so glad that y'all are here this morning. Hey, listen, y'all. We're talking this morning about bouncing back. How do you bounce back better? That's right, Sharon Washington. bounce, baby, right? How do you bounce back better when life challenges you? When life gives you some stuff, when life changes on you, how do you bounce back? How do you bounce back better? Right? A lot of us, we know people that complain all the time. We know people that have stuff happening to them and they just put their heads down. How do you bounce back better? A friend of mine was born without a right arm. And I remember meeting him for the first time. Well, not exactly meeting him. I remember seeing him. And I remember noting what he was doing. I remember noting how he was having conversations. He was directing choirs. He was, get this, playing the piano. I remember thinking, whoa, this dude has it all figured out. I remember thinking that. And if I were to ask him, he would probably laugh and say, huh? Yeah, I remember thinking that he had it all figured out because I was in a world where I saw everybody else who had 2 arms, 2 legs, and there were some people that still complained. And yet here was this dude that was born without his right arm and just had this attitude in the world of showing up like nothing was different. Like nothing was different about him. I remember just watching how he operated, and I was just amazed at how he simply seemed to ignore the very thing that most people noticed about him first. Right? I remember seeing that, and I remember just being in awe of that fact about him. As a matter of fact, to make people comfortable, sometimes he would joke about the fact that his arm wasn't there, right? How many of us have something that is different or a challenge and we are able to treat it like just another thing? How many of us? I had another friend where everything was a challenge. Everything was a setup. In many instances, this was a pleasant person for the most part, but as soon as something was uncomfortable or challenging, this person would always ask some version of, why does stuff always seem to happen to me? This person had the belief system, or they embraced this belief system that the world was set up to cause them difficulty, specifically them. They would say, I feel like I always have to fight everyone and everything all the time. And in my mind, I wanted to say sometimes, you really feel like you're that important that the entire universe would conspire against only you? Yeah, I wanted to say, I probably said some version of that at some point. How many of you have friends like that in your space? Yeah, if you do, quick advice, keep your distance. Because here's what happens. When you have people that are constantly down or complaining or things like that, you may be tempted to see if you can change them. But the reality is that they might begin to change you. Right? So how many of you are around people that just seem to be able to bounce back better? Right? How many of you are around people that just seem to be resilient? Maybe you're that person. How do some people seem to be able to bounce back better when they face a challenge, fair or unfair? Right? Some people might have some built-in stuff that is an obstacle, seems to be an obstacle for them. How is it that some people are able to do that? There's this book that I haven't really read it yet, but I was taken by some of the quotes in it. And the book is called Resilience. Resilience, the hard wisdom to navigating life. I'm saying it wrong. It's in the caption up here somewhere. So the author, his name is Eric Greitens, and he says the first step to building resilience is to take responsibility for who you are and for your life. And if you're not willing to do that, stop wasting your time. Yeah, I'll say that one more time. The first step to resilience The first step to building resilience is to take responsibility for who you are and for your life. Maybe you were born into a certain situation. Maybe you were born without an arm. Maybe you were born a certain way. Maybe things happened that your parents put in your space that you had no control over, right? So do you grow up? Do you spend your time complaining about that? Or do you take responsibility for who you are, for your life, and decide how you're going to move forward? Right? I'll say another quote from Eric Greitens, and he says this. He says, "What happens to us becomes part of us." Resilient people do not bounce back from hard experiences. They find healthy ways to integrate them into their lives. In time, people find that great calamity met with great spirit can create great strength. Yeah. Hey, Sascaline, how you doing? How you doing this morning? Right? I'll say that one more time. Resilient people do not bounce back from hard experiences. They find healthy ways to integrate them into their lives. Yeah. So I want you to take stock or inventory of the stuff that's happening in your space. How are you responding? Not reacting. How are you responding to challenges that are in your space? How are you responding? Be honest. On Fleek Beauty International, so glad that you're joining us on Instagram. Sierra Imwali, Errol B. Samuel, Cheryl, so glad that you're joining us on Instagram. Thanks for being here this morning. Saskali, Sharon. All right. Marie-Claude Bastien, good, so glad that you're here this morning. Why is it that some people seem to be more resilient than others? Maybe it's genetics, right? Maybe some people are just born more resilient. Their family genes play a piece in that. That's possible. Science says that happens sometimes. And then there's some people that just have the ability, it seems, to play the cards they're dealt. But by the same token, there are some people that seem to fold no matter what cards they're dealt. What's the difference here? What's the difference? Resilience is not a switch. It's a practice. I'll say that one more time. Resilience is not a switch. It's a practice. Some people feel like, okay, somebody else is able to bounce back from this thing. Somebody else is able to do this because they just are able to do it. They just have the ability to do it. But I'll say this again. Resilience is not a switch. It's a practice. So then the question is, how do you practice resilience? I'll go to a definition. I was looking at a site called Community Growth, and it said resilience, or my word, bounce back ability, is the capacity to recover quickly from change, stress-inducing situations, or the ability of an object. If I go to the definition on Google, the ability of an object to spring back into shape. How do you practice resilience? Well, I want to do that. I don't want to leave this with you this morning. Here's how I want us to process this. So that same site, Community Growth, talks about 4 types of resilience. Okay. The first type of resilience is physical resilience, our body's capacity to meet physical challenges. So how do you practice physical resilience? Well, I think we all know the answer to this. We all know the answer to this. Exercise. Exercise is a controlled stress that you choose that continually gives your body the practice of recovery or bounce back. I like the way that sounded. I'm going to say it again. Exercise is a controlled stress you choose that continually gives your body the practice of recovery or bounce back. Right? Nobody forces you to exercise. Nobody says, oh my, if you don't exercise, you're going to jail. Right? We choose exercise, and exercise, good exercise, is a controlled stress. Yes, it adds stress to your body. Yes, it does something to your heart. Yes, it does something to your muscles. You get to choose when to start and when to stop. Exercise is a controlled stress that you choose that continually gives your body the practice of recovery or bounce back. Of course, that recovery happens a little bit differently once you pass 40, Saskally. All right. But exercise is a way, embracing exercise is a way of building physical resilience. All right. So that's number one. Number two, mental resilience. And mental resilience is our ability to meet challenging circumstances through problem solving, coming up with alternatives, being agile and flexible. So how do you build mental resilience? Well, one of the ways that you do that is brainstorming regularly. I've said this before in the show. James Altucher wrote a book called Choose Yourself, and he talks about writing down 10 ideas daily. Just random ideas. It doesn't even really matter what they are. What ideas do you have? Write them down. Keep your brain in that brainstorming mechanism. Allow your brain to solve problems, okay, when it doesn't need to. Allow your brain to ideate. Allow your brain to be creative. A lot of times we jump right into our routine. We jump right into our day. We jump right into our regularity, our stuff, and we're pulled along. How can you intentionally create moments where you are intentional about your brain and the way that it works? Okay, brainstorm regularly. Have a space or have a time in your morning when you are writing down ideas, right? Solve puzzles. My grandfather passed away at the age of 104. His wife, my grandmother, passed away at the age of 96. They were married for like 75 years. And up till the end, my grandfather was very sharp, right? No Alzheimer's, no dementia, no mental decline. It seemed he was able to have phenomenal conversations, talking about when he used to, where he was working in Akron, Ohio in World War II. He was telling these stories at 100+ years of age. Remembered all of his grandkids, their names, birthdays, great grandkids, right? And one of the things that he would do puzzles. He would read his Bible daily. He would do things that would allow him to brainstorm and to, mentally exercise his brain regularly. And yeah, we think about physical resilience as a physical thing. We think about exercise as a physical thing, but your brain also, and we could go into this deeper later, but your brain also forms these ruts and these routines and becomes less pliable over time, especially if you don't exercise it, if you don't stretch it, if you don't challenge it, right? So you've got to challenge your brain in order for your brain to have bounce back ability or mental resilience. All right, the third type of resilience that we want to talk about is emotional resilience. Emotional resilience. And emotional resilience is how we manage our emotional response to challenges and how we deal with negative emotions. You see, a lot of us just give in to our emotions. We don't control, or we don't choose, or we're not intentional about our emotions. We just allow them to happen. We just give in to them. We allow them to control us. So I'm not saying that we're robots and we choose every single emotion, but how do we respond when we begin to experience emotions? Do I allow my emotions to drive how I operate? Or do I choose them? Or do I manage how much control they have in my space? Right? So emotional resilience is a big thing. So how do I deal with, or how do I manage emotional response? How do I build resilience in the emotional space? Well, one of the ways to do that is by journaling. Journaling. Sometimes the reason that we're not able to manage our emotions is because we have so many of them bottled up that they're just kind of bouncing around back and forth and pinging around, and we're just kind of like, oh my gosh, and we don't know how to deal with them. So one of the ways that you do that is by giving it a controlled space to be poured out. And journaling is one of the ways that you can do that. Yeah? All right, somebody said we're talking facts this morning. Thank you, On Fleek. I appreciate you. All right, so that's the third. The fourth way, or the fourth thing that we want to talk about, is social resilience. Social resilience. Our friendships, our relationships, those affect how we operate. Right? Those affect how we operate. I feel like I'm glitchy this morning. All right, we got to figure out. Yeah. All right. Those affect how we operate. Our connection to others, how we support others, or how we support each other during difficult times. Okay, all of that is important in the building our social resilience, right? So how do we build social resilience more effectively? Well, we've got to figure out how to develop different types of community. So I've got maybe my play community, or I've got my community that I share information with. I would call that my trust community. And then I've got my community that I perform activity with. Maybe I do community services or social activities. I've got to be intentional about building these communities so that I have a space for social resilience. When something goes wrong in relationships, when something goes wrong in my social environment, how do I bounce back? How do I have supports around me that help me to bounce back? Right? That's social resilience. And that's one of the resilience types that we've got to pay attention to in order to have bounce back ability. So my question this week, and here's where we're ending today, is how are you building your bounce back ability? How are you building your bounce back ability? As we do every week, I want you to do some homework. Okay, so your homework is this. We've got the 4 resilience types. I want you to list them and decide what you are going to do this week to build your bounce in each area. How are you going to build your bounce in the physical area? How are you going to build your bounce with mental? How are you going to build your bounce with emotional? How are you going to build your bounce in your social area? How are you going to do this? I want to encourage you to build your bounce, right? I love what Eric Greitens says. He says, excuses are incompatible with excellence. Excuses are incompatible with excellence. So my question is, what are you going to do to take accountability and grow? Eric Greitens also says, don't expect a time in your life when you'll be free from change, free from struggle, free from worry. To be resilient, you've got to understand that your objective is not to come to rest, because there isn't rest. Your objective is to use what hits you to change your trajectory in a positive direction. Yeah, that's all for this week. Join me this Wednesday at 1:30 for Story to Sales on LinkedIn Audio. This week, we're talking about BTS, behind the scenes, the how and why of sharing your business story. You want to know when we're going live with it? Text live to 240-557-8679, and I'll send that link to you. That's live, LIVE, to 240-557-8679, and I'll get you that link. I want to end today with a repeat of Eric Greitens, where he says, excuses are incompatible with excellence. If excellence is your intention, then give it your whole attention. That last piece was an RK3ism. Hey, y'all, it's Monday, and we want to shift your mindset to a place of growth. It doesn't just start and stop on Monday. We want to encourage you to take your Monday mindset into the tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. Yeah, be curious. Make a choice. Move. Start a movement. Be a movement. Join me next week, Monday at 8 a.m. on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn for the next Monday Mindset Movement. Until then, be amazing, my friends.